Mark Carney critiques Canada's immigration system addressing housing, healthcare, and infrastructure challenges. As Canada faces growing challenges related to housing, healthcare, and infrastructure, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has offered a pointed critique of the nation's immigration system. According to Carney, the country's immigration policies have lost their brand, creating a complex web of issues that demand urgent attention. With a projected influx of newcomers, the next government will need to recalibrate its approach to ensure that immigration remains a force for growth, rather than exacerbating existing pressures on vital public services and housing markets. If you are interested in this topic, please pay attention and watch the video through to the end to get all the information. Please hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to push the notification bell for an upcoming video. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, has recently called attention to a concern many Canadians have been grappling with: the country's immigration system is not functioning as it should. However, Carney's critique isn't about closing doors to newcomers. Instead, he is focused on the cracks in the system, specifically rising housing costs, overstretched healthcare, overwhelmed schools, and an immigration infrastructure that is not keeping pace with rapid population growth. In this video, Carney addresses these challenges while recognizing the value of immigration and calling for practical solutions. His statement comes at a time when many Canadians are already expressing frustration with the state of their country's immigration policies and the consequences of rapid population growth. Immigration system not working. Carney's remarks, made during a televised interview, highlighted the sharp increase in Canada's population since the pandemic, with immigration playing a significant role. Canada has been experiencing nearly 3% population growth annually, primarily driven by immigration. In 2023 alone, Canada welcomed over 470,000 permanent residents, and the number of temporary residents, including international students, temporary workers, and refugee claimants, has also risen dramatically. By 2024, Canada's population had surged past 41 million, sparking concerns over how to support such a rapid increase. While Carney acknowledged the undeniable benefits of immigration, such as boosting the economy, supporting an aging workforce, and filling labor gaps in critical sectors like agriculture, logistics, hospitality, healthcare, and construction, he stressed that this population boom is placing undue pressure on Canada's infrastructure. Carney explained that without adequate investment in housing, healthcare, and public transit to keep up with population growth, the country risks a worsening quality of life for all residents, both newcomers and longtime citizens. As Carney pointed out, immigration policies that fail to account for the infrastructural needs of an expanding population can easily backfire, resulting in heightened public dissatisfaction. Pressures on housing and healthcare. One of the most immediate consequences of rapid population growth without corresponding infrastructure development is the housing crisis. Cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Halifax have witnessed unprecedented increases in housing prices, making it increasingly difficult for both new and existing residents to find affordable housing. Carney emphasized that Ontario, in particular, is projected to need 1.5 million new homes by 2031 to support its growing population. But bureaucratic delays, high construction costs, and labor shortages have stalled progress, resulting in a significant mismatch between the demand for housing and the supply available. In addition to housing, healthcare services are also under strain. With a growing population, there is increased demand for medical services, creating wait times and delays in access to healthcare, further compounding the frustration felt by Canadians. Carney noted that the government's inability to effectively manage these challenges could undermine the public's trust in immigration policies and the political leadership that supports them. Immigration cap shift. In response to growing concerns, the federal government introduced a cap on immigration targets in late 2024. Originally, Canada planned to accept 500,000 permanent residents in 2025. However, the target was lowered to 395,000 as a direct result of the growing pressure on infrastructure. The government also set a cap on temporary residents, including international students, which was expected to affect sectors reliant on foreign labor and international tuition. By 2025, the number of study permits was reduced by 10%, and restrictions were placed on the number of temporary workers allowed into the country. These measures, while intended to ease the strain on Canada's infrastructure, have sparked significant ripple effects throughout the country. Colleges, which have become increasingly reliant on international students for tuition revenue, are now facing budget crises. Industries that depend on foreign workers, such as hospitality and construction, are struggling to fill labor shortages. Carney argued that these shifts have not been handled well, particularly in the absence of long-term planning that could prevent adverse effects on key sectors. Carney's influence and political context. What makes Carney's critique especially significant is his influence as a former central banker and his connection to Canadian political circles. He has advised senior Liberals in the past and is rumored to be eyeing a future leadership role. His critique, therefore, carries extra weight, particularly when it touches on immigration policy, a key component of the Liberal Party's platform. Carney's voice is powerful because he isn't just criticizing the system from an academic or economic standpoint, he is signaling to both the public and political leaders that real action is needed. Importantly, Carney was not anti-immigration. He reiterated that Canadians remain welcoming to newcomers, but what is needed is better planning and coordination. The concern, according to Carney, is not the generosity of Canada's immigration policies but the inability of the government to manage the rapid changes that come with it. Carney emphasized that without careful planning, Canada risks failing to meet its own goals of inclusivity and sustainability, and ultimately alienating public support. The disconnect between immigration streams. Carney also raised concerns about the fragmented nature of Canada's immigration system. Federal and provincial programs often operate independently, creating confusion for applicants who are trying to transition from temporary status to permanent residency. The federal government's recent changes to the express entry system, such as eliminating points for arranged employment, further complicated the process for skilled workers. Carney argued that sudden policy changes undermine the confidence of applicants and employers alike, making it harder for both sides to trust the system. The international student sector is also facing turbulence, particularly with the recent caps on study permits and the requirement for attestation letters from schools and provinces. These new policies have led to confusion, delays, and in some cases, exploitation by unethical agents. Carney admitted that the international education sector requires reform but criticized the government for its lack of coordination and fairness in addressing these issues. Provincial fallout and regional challenges. As Ottawa struggles to manage immigration, provinces have been left to adapt quickly, often with limited resources. For example, British Columbia's provincial nominee program saw its allocations cut in half, forcing the province to prioritize sectors like healthcare and entrepreneurship. Meanwhile, skilled workers in other sectors are left in limbo, waiting for permanent residency while facing increasing uncertainty. In contrast, Manitoba has introduced a temporary policy allowing eligible nominees to extend their work permits by 2 years while awaiting permanent status. This policy has provided some stability for applicants, offering them a chance to stay in the country and contribute while their applications are processed. However, such initiatives are rare, and across Canada, provinces are being asked to handle growing immigration numbers while grappling with their own affordability crises. What is immigration really serving? Carney's remarks ultimately raise the fundamental question: what is immigration policy supposed to achieve in 2025? Is it primarily about economic growth? Humanitarian goals? Family reunification? Regional development? Carney believes that right now, Canada's immigration system is trying to accomplish all of these things simultaneously, and as a result, it isn't doing any of them effectively. He pointed to the expansion of the temporary foreign worker program, which has filled key labor shortages but also created a class of residents who work, pay taxes, but have little long-term security. Carney argued that if Canada wants these temporary workers to contribute more fully, the path to permanent residency must be simpler and more accessible. He urged that immigration policy be streamlined and fairer, giving workers the opportunity to fully integrate into the Canadian workforce and society. A quiet push for change. Behind the scenes, Canadian officials are beginning to work on a significant overhaul of the country's immigration system. Immigration Minister Mark Miller has launched a comprehensive review of temporary resident streams, with the possibility of merging underperforming programs or introducing stricter standards for labor market assessments. A new approach is being tested in which smaller cities and rural communities receive targeted immigration allocations, tailored to their specific workforce and infrastructure needs. This shift could help alleviate pressure on major urban centers and distribute the benefits of immigration more evenly across the country. Technology is also playing a role in the evolving immigration landscape. Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada is testing AI tools to speed up application processing and prioritize family reunification and humanitarian cases. The long-term goal is to align Canada's openness to immigration with its practical capacity to support new arrivals effectively. Real solutions on the horizon. Despite the turbulence surrounding Canada's immigration policies, promising developments are emerging. The federal government launched the National Housing Accord, a $4 billion initiative designed to accelerate housing development in cities that commit to rapid zoning changes and permit approvals. Cities like Vancouver, Brampton, and Halifax are already on board. Additionally, regional immigration programs like the Atlantic Immigration Program and the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot are being reviewed for broader implementation, aiming to spread population growth beyond major urban centers and into communities that can benefit from it. Carney supports these initiatives but stresses the need for follow-through. While announcements are promising, the real challenge lies in delivering tangible results. For Carney, it's not just about policy changes on paper, it's about executing those changes to create a sustainable and well-managed immigration system. Canada's next government will have to deal with an immigration system that has lost its brand. Donning a red and white jersey with "Canada Leads" printed on the front, Ontario Premier Doug Ford seemed resolute at a Toronto event on April 7 as he vowed to attract world-leading scientists and the brightest minds from the United States, many of whom are reportedly concerned about losing their jobs due to President Donald Trump's funding cuts. "We are going to go on many fronts to fight these tariffs," he said. "But one way to win big time is to get the brightest minds in the United States. I can tell you the president won't be happy." Ford's statement came days after officials from Manitoba and British Columbia talked about rolling out the welcome mat for American healthcare experts. Capitalizing on tensions linked to Trump's policies seems like a good plan, but analysts doubt whether Canada can take advantage of them without implementing crucial changes to its immigration system, especially since some lawyers say the country doesn't have a specialized program that can successfully attract high-skilled professionals from abroad, and it's also become harder for them to become permanent residents. Even if Taylor Swift wanted to immigrate to Canada, she could not, Stephen Green, a managing partner at Toronto-based Green and Spiegel LLP, said. "We don't have a program for people with really extraordinary ability, the fabulous artists, the outstanding businesspeople. These extraordinary foreigners can technically enter Canada with a work permit for a few years, or even get a work permit after studying here, but lawyers say the pathway to becoming a permanent resident from a temporary one has become more difficult in recent years, which would likely discourage them." Lawyers and consultants hope that whoever forms Canada's next government can revisit the immigration system and work on its flaws through meaningful discussions with industry, but it's something that requires urgent attention since Canada's reputation among economic immigrants has been hit in recent years. Canada has lost its brand, Mehdi Basiri, co-founder of Applyboard Incorporated, a Canadian digital platform used by students to apply to universities, said. "Any administration that comes in, before getting anything out, needs to stand back and ask, how do we build our reputation? Because we are back to where we were 10 to 15 years ago. This damaged reputation, as Vance Langford, co-president of the Canadian Immigration Lawyers Association, calls it, is a result of unusual trends and changes in the immigration space that have exposed weaknesses in the existing points system used to bring in foreign skilled workers. Canada has several immigration programs, but most temporary residents and foreigners living outside the country try to come to the country as skilled workers. These programs are managed by an online system called Express Entry, which provides candidates with points for their education level, work experience, English and French language proficiency, age, and other factors. The higher the applicants score out of a total of 1,200, the higher their chances of becoming permanent residents, which eventually leads to citizenship.
The system is designed to attract young, skilled people from around the world. For example, applicants under 30 receive the highest possible number of points in the age category. Applicants also receive points for Canadian educational degrees and work experience. The Express Entry system has worked well in the past and allowed a steady flow of skilled newcomers to enter Canada, which relies on immigration for its economic growth. But the number of international students and foreign workers drastically increased after Ottawa looked to fill a record number of job vacancies when the pandemic ended. Ottawa also introduced a policy in 2023 that allowed it to bypass the points system and set lower cutoff scores for certain groups, such as tradespeople, engineers, healthcare workers and French speakers, by conducting separate immigration draws for them. These two steps meant there were far more temporary residents competing for a smaller number of spots, which vastly increased the cutoff score that general candidates needed to qualify to become permanent residents. As a result, 2 million temporary residents are expected to leave the country in 2025 and 2026 as their permits expire, which is also part of the federal government's plan to reduce Canada's population growth by 2027 amidst rising unemployment and a housing crisis. The mass departure could include many temporary residents who have specialized skill sets that could have helped the country's struggling productivity levels, analysts said, because the point system isn't always capable of differentiating between highly skilled newcomers, who are more likely to earn high salaries and boost the economy, and those who barely meet the minimum requirements or are trying to game the system. For example, a foreign graduate from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology or the University of Waterloo could potentially receive the same number of points as someone with an online university degree in the systems education segment. Martin Basiri, the other co-founder of ApplyBoard, said in a podcast program called Borderlines on April 1st. He also said Canada's recent focus on bringing French-speaking newcomers through the category-based draws introduced in 2023 creates an imbalance. If you speak French and you have no skills, you are better than if you have a master's degree in computer science, or, if you make $150,000, he said. Some of Basiri's employees are currently on a break to sort out their language requirements in order to meet the cutoff scores and become permanent residents, he said. Until March 21st, about 18,500 newcomers were admitted into Canada this year through the French category, which is almost twice as much as the 9,350 admitted through the general draws, according to Stephen Mearns, an immigration lawyer at Larley Rosenberg Barristers and Solicitors. Simply put, CLA's Langford said the category-based draws have made the immigration system unworkable for economic immigrants. How does Canada expect to attract and retain skilled people with a point system if a candidate in the pool with 510 points does not receive an invitation to apply? He said. Category-based draws need to be seriously reduced. The leaders of Canada's two main political parties, Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, haven't talked much about the specific changes to immigration they would make if elected, but both seem keen on keeping a cap on the number of newcomers until there's enough housing. Immigration hasn't dominated the campaign trail the way it generally did throughout 2024, with Trump's tariffs taking up most of the discussion. But due to various ongoing nuances in the immigration space, Ottawa should be cautious in pushing too aggressively to meet its target of bringing down the number of temporary residents to about 5% of the population by 2027, especially with a much shorter runway now. Bank of Nova Scotia economist Rebecca Young said. That would require what she called an unrealistic net reduction of 1 million people by 2027 that could compel many highly productive people currently in the workforce to leave. It could actually be harmful if they try to stick to those original timelines, she said. There should instead be an agenda that really focuses on better integrating and maximizing the potential of those that are in the country. Problems, however, also remain at the other end of the spectrum, with some economists expecting many temporary residents to overstay their work permits and not leave the country by either transferring to a visitor permit, applying for asylum or becoming undocumented. This could lead to the government undercounting the population and impact overall economic measures. CIBC World Markets Inc. Economist Benjamin Tal expects Canada's population to grow by 1.5% in the next 2 years, which is higher than the government's prediction of negative growth or a decline. Many people who are expected to leave will not leave, he said. That's something that will be the one challenge facing the new government when it comes to immigration. Tal's prediction already seems to be reflected in the rising number of asylum seekers, many of whom have unjustly applied as they have increasingly fewer hopes to stay in Canada, former Immigration Minister Mark Miller said last November. The number of asylum seekers and related groups increased by about 26,000 in the fourth quarter last year, according to Statistics Canada, marking the 12th consecutive quarterly increase. The total number of asylum seekers was a record 457,285 people as of the end of 2024. No government is going to be able to escape having to deal with rising asylum claimants, Young said. That's a very challenging area that is outside the realm of economics, but they're going to need policies and discussions on how they are going to thoughtfully manage these pressures. Another recent change that can discourage high-skilled economic immigrants from coming to Canada is the cancellation of the extra points applicants received upon getting a job offer supported by a labor market impact assessment. Most employers in Canada looking to hire foreign workers need to receive an LMIA, which is a government document that states they weren't able to find a worker for a specific position in Canada and had to look for someone abroad. Foreign workers with LMIA job offers used to get about 50 to 200 additional points, which gave them an edge over others and encouraged them to come to Canada. That was discontinued in March. Before then, some groups were illegally selling LMIA-approved jobs for thousands of dollars to foreigners either outside the country or already in Canada who were desperately looking to boost their points in the express entry system and become permanent residents. The more senior the job's role, the higher the points they received. But some immigration lawyers believe the government should have taken a more nuanced approach to resolve the problem instead of eliminating all the points in one go. They couldn't deal with the fraud issue, so they didn't know what to do, Green said. They just threw it all in and said, cancel it. There would have been a much better way of doing it. Green and Langford both said eliminating the 200 points that the top category of workers used to receive was a mistake, since that essentially closes the door for top executives or managerial candidates looking to become permanent residents, and these are the kind of people that Canada ideally wants. The change makes it impossible for senior executives who are 40 years old or more, working in multinational companies, to immigrate to Canada and, therefore, difficult to attract executives to come here on a work permit, Green said. As an example, he said a chef graduating from a Canadian school and with work experience had more chance of becoming an immigrant than a 45-year-old senior executive who runs a multinational company and is responsible for 3,000 people. Despite these issues, Green still believes Canada has the best immigration system in the world. Whoever wins the election just needs to tweak some parts of the system to align them with the government's aim to boost its economy, he said. That could mean providing more points to people who study or already work in Canada, or to people looking to enter fields where there's a labor shortage, such as healthcare or construction. It could also mean providing additional points to newcomers who earn more than the median salary, such as 25 points for people earning about $60,000 and 50 points for those earning more than $100,000, as Martin Basiri said. Whatever those tweaks may be, lawyers say they need to happen quickly. Otherwise, Canada may struggle in the next few years to attract the kind of talent it wants, said Mehdi Basiri, who came to Canada as an international student in 2011 and co-founded Applyboard, which is reportedly now valued at $4 billion. It's very important to build the brand and the reputation, he said. Or else, we are not going to achieve anything. In conclusion, Mark Carney's critique highlights a crucial crossroads for Canada's immigration system. As the country navigates these pressing challenges, the next government will be tasked with developing strategies that not only attract skilled newcomers but also integrate them into a sustainable, well-functioning society. Ensuring the future success of Canada's immigration policy will require a thoughtful balance, one that addresses immediate concerns while building long-term resilience in the face of an evolving demographic landscape.